you're new to our church, I hope you will take time to read the insert and that you will particularly be here on the 12th of November, not only for the event of turning the boxes in, but the a cappella group, Brotherhood. If you have never heard them, you just need to hear them. They're great. Last November, BuzzFeed, and for those of you not familiar with it, it's an entertainment and social news media website, reported that the Gaines family, now some of you may know them, I don't watch their particular HGTV program called Fixer Upper, but I have seen it on my home TV at times. But it's a show that Chip and Joanna Gaines are a popular couple who star in that program, and obviously it's a home remodeling show. They also attend a church that does not support same-sex marriage and views homosexuality as a sin. And whatever their church teaches, the Gaineses never had made a comment on air about LGBT people, same-sex marriage, or even their religion. And many of the readers' responses on BuzzFeed were interesting. They took issue with the media company's motive in reporting the story, and some describing it as a witch hunt. One respondent wrote these words: "You are inciting a wave of negative attention on this couple for something that indirectly links to them. That's not journalism." The Gaines, however, importantly, and I think significantly, did not immediately respond. But in January of this year, they released some comments. Chip titled them Chip's New Year's Revelation. And in it, he said that he and Joanna do not always agree on everything. They do not see eye to eye on everything. But added, if Joanna and I, who are best friends, don't see a lot of things the same way, how on earth do we expect the world of strangers to magically align? The reality is that we may not all get on the same page, but I think that's okay. Then he began to allude to the presidential race of last year, and Chip said, "In my lifetime, I can't recall humanity being more divided. Plenty of folks are sad and scared and angry, and there are sound bites that being fed to us that seem to fuel judgment, fear, and hatred. And Joe and I refuse to be baited into using our influence in a way that will further harm an already hurting world." And then he concludes, "If there is any hope for all of us to move forward, to heal, and to grow, we have got to learn to engage people who are different from us with dignity and with love. We care about you for the simple fact that you are a person, a neighbor on planet Earth. It's not about what color your skin is, how much money you have in the bank, or your political affiliation, your sexual orientation, your gender, your nationality, or your faith. That's all fascinating," he said, "but we are not about to get into the nasty business of throwing stones at each other." He even suggests a conversation. You want to talk about how to build bridges between people that disagree, we want to be a part of that conversation. Now, that may be some of the wisest words I've read in the last year or two. What we see here is an ever-growing trend due in part to the immediacy of what I would call the news cycle, that we have to have the latest and the greatest gotcha question. And whether or not your particular party or your particular person or even your particular perspective was on the winning side, then you got to play gotcha. Unfortunately for us, Jesus was a master at handling these. I don't think up until I took this particular angle did I ever realize how often Jesus got tangled up in the gotcha questions. Unfortunately for us, he in fact was a master at handling the gotcha questions. Chip's response, and especially his comment that he and his wife refused to be baited into using their influence as a way to further harm an already hurting world, I believe is spot on. It's certainly true that there are many social matters that we Christians see differently. And we often see, if for lack of a better word, see people trying to bait each other to get them to argue. And for those of us who really don't want to see that and don't want to participate in it, we find ourselves either very silent and not involved, or we find ourselves kind of getting our story together so that we can jump in the fray when we are needed to. It's an account of the Pharisees here that I want to point to today. Pharisees are trying to trip up Jesus. They loved to do that, and so they bring a question about paying taxes. If you've been around the church, you have seen and heard this story. Jesus' response, asking whose image is on it, is an incredibly important one, and it's the classic example of the risk that a trial lawyer makes when he asks a question that he does not know the answer for. Lawyers are trained never to ask a question that you don't have the answer for. Why? Because you don't want to get surprised. But in this case, they asked one that they weren't ready for, and so he used that unexpected question to make a point. And so Jesus does that. When his opponents say the image of the coin is the emperor, in fact, Jesus fires back, "Go therefore to the emperor, to the things that the emperor, and to God the things that are God. So give to that which belongs to that." So Jesus not only avoided the baited trap that they had set for him, but he in fact delivers what I hope you to see, a powerful message about the priorities that people have. Now, this, I think, illustrates what you and I need to know about these gotcha questions. At a minimum, it avoids escalating conflict when you're able to assess it the way that Jesus did, but it also provides an opening for a baiter to reconsider their position. Now, I think they did. I don't know if they fully ever engaged with Jesus, but they certainly heard him. Let me give you two other examples. I've walked around several of them this week, and these are two prominent ones. At least the first one is very prominent. You remember the example where the scribes and the Pharisees brought to Jesus a woman caught in adultery, and they asked him to choose between approving their stoning of her or going against what would have been the Mosaic law. In case you're wondering, if you have philosophical knowledge about how to argue, they're offering him a lose-lose situation. It is clear that he has no choice in either of those, and you know what happens. Jesus says very profoundly and very clearly, whoever hasn't sinned should throw the first stone. Now, I don't know how quickly they scattered that day, but I've got a feeling they moved back fairly quickly. Now, not all baiting is malicious, but some of it can be, and so we've got to be careful. One more story that I found important. Remember the one who came to Jesus and addressed him, "Good teacher." I've had folks come to me and they will say, "Dr. Reverend Dan Francis." And I said, "I'm glad you have realized." I really have had people, "Dr. Reverend Dan Francis, would you answer my question regarding this?" Immediately, my skepticism overflows. It overflows. But he came to him and he said, "Good teacher, why do you call me good? No one is good but God," he says. He went on to answer the man's question about how to receive eternal life, and he avoided being manipulated. I thought that was all that there was in there, and I kept digging, and there was a couple others, just very brief ones. In Mark 14, there is this place when the high priest stood up before them and asked, "Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is the testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. And the high priest said, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Now, let me pause there. They baited him, they leaned into him, they asked him a question, and what was his response? Sometimes, and I will just encourage you, if you get baited, wait a moment, because sometimes the answer is this: silence is golden. Now, I know, I personally don't ever have a problem with silence, but I know many of you do. I'm being funny. But we all do, don't we? All have difficulty being silent when we're feeling something. But here, Jesus must have been feeling a lot of things, but he chose silence. So on the one side, let's put silence as golden, and we'll put on the other side here in a moment. Pilate says, "You are the king then." And Jesus answered, "You say that I am the king." Then what does he say? "In fact, the reason I was born and I came into the world is to what? Is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Now, let me just tell you, that's not being silent. That's being straight as an arrow. So on the one side, sometimes silence is golden. On the other side, truth is your testimony. And he simply said, truth. My testimony is this. You believe it or you don't believe it. And at that particular point, I'm not sure what else he needed to say. Let's move forward. How about the gotcha situation that's common in our culture? The gotcha situation that's common in our culture. Not taking the bait is an important skill for us because in our world today, baiting is always kind of out there. Have you seen the talking heads on the news program sometimes? They get the one on this side, the one on that side, and they just lease them against each other, and nobody stops to negotiate it, and you can't hear either one of them. I was listening to a program coming in from work the other day, and I thought, I finally hit it to another station. I said, who in their right mind would listen to that? I mean, I don't mind hearing both sides of a subject, but my goodness, we hear none of it. It shows the everyday discussions about religion and politics and social issues and all that surrounds that. If you've ever worked with youth, and I have, it is one of those events that you have to analyze. And it's with children too, but with youth in particular, because let me just go to an experience I had this week. I had Holden on my own. Now, I don't particularly care to have any of the grandchildren on my own, because that is a frightening thing. They could do something wrong and I get blamed for it is the major reason for that. And with Holden, there's a high chance that he is going to do something. So I do what every good grandfather does, and that is I took him to a playground, to an enclosed, caged playground. The ones that his mother will not allow him to go to. She has more than once told me not to take him to those places because they're nasty and filthy and just awful. So what do? As soon as I get him into my presence, I take him to one. Why? Because I'm her father and I don't have to obey her. So I took Holden to the cleanest one I could find. And like a good grandfather, I take, those little towels they give you, little hand towels. Well, I took about 20 of them, attached them together, and washed him from head to toe while we were standing there, and cleaned him all up before I sent him into the germ-fested place. Now, I personally did not want to go in there myself, so I stayed on the outside, glad that I could see through the glass. And that's where I stayed. That is, I stayed there until the baiter came into the room. And here I am I'm thinking all my sermonic thoughts as I'm observing this cage of jungle kids in there playing with each other. And I came away with some profound conclusions. The young man that entered in what I call the personality park, because all personalities are identified in this little park. There was one young man who entered, and he violated the trust by having Power Ranger toys in his hands. Now, you're not supposed to come in there with toys in your hands because the toys are, you play. Because if you come in with toys and nobody else has toys, guess what happens? Mob scene. Everybody wants the toys. And this boy, he has trained himself. He went to monkey school, and so he's able to leap onto things and keep everybody coming close to him away from him. Boy, did I want to get a hold of him. So I sat there and I began to write, and I wanted to make some observations. And the first one is, some parents believe in what I call jungle maturation. You know what jungle maturation is? It means what I heard one parent, I promise, I heard a parent say this: let them loose so we can enjoy a good meal. Let them loose in the cage so we can enjoy a good meal. It's probably his kid that had the Power Ranger toys. The second one was, some parents believe in jungle intimidation. They don't stand outside like I did and watch through the glass. They come in, and at any point where one kid disobeys, they have their eyes marked on them and will move toward them. Won't touch them, but I've seen many of them act as a police presence in that room, and it's scary sometimes. I wanted to do what they said. And then some parents, grandparents like me, are the jungle observation folks. My eyes will guide and guard against what I would consider to be the brutality of the beasts that are in there. And anytime I see Holden hurting others or Holden getting hurt, a big chance that's going to happen, he and I have a conversation. Now, why do I say all that? I say all that because ultimately I teach premarital counseling, and I've been doing weddings lately, and here I'm looking at the jungle, and here I'm thinking about this baiting, and I'm thinking, what's the point of all this? Well, there is this graph you're going to see that will blow your mind. I've studied it quite a bit, and you'll see it up on the screen here. I didn't even know who came up with this, but I did some study on him. Where I saw it was in the premarital guide that I use with the couples that I train. And Dr. Albert, whatever his name is there, he came up with this, and he is still a professor emeritus at UCLA. But look at this. Now, for a man who speaks a lot of words, this was very, very disappointing. Very disappointing. I mean, 7% of my spoken words communicate. That means some of you need to step it up because, 38 come by voice and tone, and 55% by body language. What does it say when I do this? How often? I mean, can you see that? How about this? How about this? But you know where I'm going with this. The body language that took place with those kids, the body language that takes place when I stand before a couple, the body language that tells who we are to other people, how receptive we are. When's the last time you looked a stone-cold poor person, likely a homeless person, right in the eyes? Let me tell you, it's scary because they might ask you to do something. Sure, it's scary. And I'm bringing about all this, and I'm going to try to connect it here together, is that we live in a world where we resist talking about things because there has been developing a kind of fear about, do you believe this, do you believe that? And so we go back and forth with this stuff. And I really don't want us to do that. And so my point is that it's not just young people, but we grown-ups can initiate power struggles with our language, with our, body language, with our tone, with our voice, that we're not even fully aware of. So let's finish up with this. Jesus' example in this matter suggests two things. And we're going to talk about both of them. We're going to mention both of them here, and then we're just going to talk about them the rest of the time. First, we should not be baiters ourselves. And second, we should try not to take the bait from others. Now, what's the bait here? Well, some of us may think of it as Jesus was able to resist this baiting stuff because he wasn't mere mortal. He was God and man and all that kind of mixed up. But come on now, we can do better than that. We are not just left to our emotions and to our simple body language. We can learn what our bodies say. We can learn what our voices say. We can learn the tone. We can learn those things. And it is hard. I mean, it is hard. There are days or weeks that I fail at it. But I read Scripture and then I get renewed about it. So let's attempt to model Jesus by looking at all of our faith experience and trying to put it together. Now let me kind of lean a little bit into the elephant in the room. and that is this political process. I like what Rick Warren says. I'm not left-wing or right-wing. I'm the whole bird. And I would agree with him. I'm the whole bird. I try to understand both sides. Being a whole bird Christian means accepting that there is a biblical foundation for conservative Christianity. And it rises out of the covenant that God made with Abraham. And when God says, walk before me and be blameless, there's a part of that. So we Christians, we conservative Christians, need to understand that we have a place in God's kingdom. But the liberal wing of the Christianity is equally biblical, and it's grounded in God's people being on exodus from slavery. And so ultimately, if you want to go back and to look at Christians, and I'm not looking at non-Christians here, but Christians and their political, their ultimate persuasions, that's where ultimately it comes from in both worlds. Now, we certainly can mess it all up, believe me. Too often, we Christians focus on the winners and the losers, when in reality, Christ is really interested in all the losers. He's interested in all of us who feel left out. And instead of focusing on one or the other, you and I need to focus on the church. Now, why do I say all this? Because I have a feeling that we in the church have not necessarily always found the church a friendly place in order to talk about the things that we're concerned about. Now, I'm very, very careful in this pulpit not to endorse a political candidate or to bash anybody, except from the standpoint of if one of the candidates or whatever, or anybody, deals with morality and principles and those kind of things, I ultimately, as pastor, prophet, need to deal with those things. But I will tell you that on Wednesday night, sometimes we just open it up in our Bible study time, and we talk pretty openly about things, and we kind of bridge that gap. So I'm just going to tell you that we still have a friendly place in this church to express what we think about those kind of things. We wrestle with difficult issues, we share each other's perspectives, and hopefully we learn from each other. So as I was stirring with this week, I turned my outline in early, but I wanted to say 2 or 3 things that were what I call practical promptings. And so we're going to finish today with these practical promptings. I added those to the outline this morning. The first one is this: make a clear and countering but very civil claim from the other side. In other words, if you have a different perspective about something, no matter what it is, it's okay to make that known, but do it in a way that presents itself in a very civil way. And don't throw the bomb. If you ever, those that throw bombs, they go, and then they run off, they just want to throw the bomb in and blow things up and then leave. No, stay in there. Secondly, place it in the context of the situation. We both know that good people can differ about such things. Now, if you reach a point of absolute certainty that you cannot agree with another person, then maybe the third one is what you need. Offer a way out. Let's talk about something else, because this relationship is more important than our differences. And that's what I would say to you. We as a church, and believe me, I don't sense this is a big problem among us. I just think it came up in the lectionary, and I want to address it before it even is. But I hope we always have room in this place for all the chickens, the left and the right and everybody in between. And it matters because we are connected to something so much bigger than the political agitation that stirs in our world right now. There are times when it is important to hold our ground and to declare a position. Let me just say that. In light of all this, it's still important to be able to say your position and to hold your ground and to do it willingly and lovingly. But remember what Jesus did. Give to God the things that are God's. My hope for us, for you, is that we will not be baiters, but we will, in fact, not even choose to be baited, but that we will be people of the book to where we entertain that God's love is more important than all of the other things. And that we are not power mongers and we are not political analysts. We just love people more than anything else. That's really my hope for us.